We begin today with the president reportedly insulting literally millions of people, including hundreds of thousands of naturalized American citizens who come from African countries, El Salvador and Haiti, what the president describes as an S-H-I-T whole nations. We'll let the president have those words, and we're going to stick to rising above it. But he may have topped himself this morning with tweets that could pull the plug on the immigration deal, what actually affects all of these people. And I have a great team here to help me break down all of it. And I want to start with NBC's Kristen Welker at the White House. Kristen, first of all, the immigration deal, beyond the president's ridiculous rhetoric, let's talk about the deal. That's what matters. Is it dead? Because yesterday it looked like actual lawmakers were making progress.
There were a few moments there yesterday, Steph, when it looked like the immigration deal was coming together. Jeff Flake signaling that they were getting very close. And yet you had the White House and conservatives effectively indicating they were not on board. Sarah Huckabee Sanders during that press briefing yesterday saying, look, we think we can get to a deal, but we're not there yet. The reason why they felt it was too soft on those dreamers, those nearly 800,000 young people who were brought here illegally as children. Let me read you the president's tweets this morning as they relate to that immigration deal, because as you point out, Steph, that is really what's ultimately potentially being sacrificed here. President Trump making it very difficult to negotiate with Democrats because of his heated rhetoric. He says the so-called bipartisan DACA deal presented yesterday to myself and a group of Republican senators and congressmen was a big step backwards. Wall was not properly funded. Chain and lottery were made worse, and USA would be forced to take large numbers of people from high crime countries which are doing badly. I want a merit-based system of immigration and people who will help take country to the next level. I want safety and security for our people. I want to stop the massive inflow of drugs. I want to fund our military. It goes on and on. But bottom line, Steph, is that the president's vulgar comments about Haitians and Africans could potentially, based on my conversations with folks on Capitol Hill, make it very difficult for Democrats to sit down at the table and try to get a deal done with him on immigration. Whereas yesterday, before all of this happened, they were ready to make a deal.
Okay, let's walk through what the president said, because this morning he appears to be denying saying S nations, but yesterday and last night he was on Twitter. He said nothing about it. He didn't deny it. The White House didn't take it back. And those who were in the meeting who could come to his aid, a la, let's say, Lindsey Graham, we haven't heard from. And I'd also like to point out, I don't believe President Trump has ever been to Africa. I could be wrong. I don't believe he's ever been to Haiti. So how would he be able to weigh in on the state of those nations?
Well, let me just tell you what he's tweeting this morning, Steph. In terms of that denial, he's choosing his words very carefully. Let me read you his tweet, and let's do some analysis on the other side. This is what he's saying. Never said anything derogatory about Haitians, other than Haiti is obviously a very poor and troubled country. Never said take them out. Made up by Dems, have a wonderful relationship with Haitians, probably should record future meetings. Unfortunately, no trust. Here's what he doesn't specifically put in quotes and deny, Steph. That word, that expletive that you quoted off the top. So not a direct denial about saying that. Now, yesterday, as you rightfully point out, the White House released a statement not denying the president made those comments, instead explaining the comments. Here's what a White House official said yesterday. Certain Washington politicians choose to fight for foreign countries, but President Trump will always fight for the American people. Like other nations that have merit-based immigration, President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions that make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation. Steph, worth noting that at the backdrop of all of this, 8 years to the day since that earthquake which devastated Haiti, a lot of officials there, instead of just being focused on marking that tragic anniversary, now lashing out at President Trump, and so are a host of other leaders, as well as Democrats and Republicans, Steph.
An earthquake that devastated Haitians, people who have faced adversity beyond what most Americans could ever comprehend, and the president of the luckiest nation in the world taking swipes and jabs. And we should also point out that the president said he didn't say it and they should record these meetings. Earlier this week, when there was that recorded meeting on immigration where the president said to Dianne Feinstein he would be open to a clean deal on Dreamers, the next day when the White House released that transcript, somehow So odd that portion of the conversation was left out. The White House has since corrected it. I want to bring my panel in. Bret Stephens, an MSNBC political contributor and op-ed columnist for the New York Times. Brendan Greeley, a contributor to the Economist Free Exchange blog. And Midwin Charles, an attorney and contributor to Essence magazines. And Robert Costa, an MSNBC political analyst and national political reporter at the Washington Post. And you know we're all going to be watching him on TV tonight because it's Friday. Bret, to you first. Whether or not the president used these specific words, I'm already seeing, well, maybe it's conflated. The president may have used this term about some African countries, but not Haiti. Let's take a step back. Let's look at the president's history. Housing discrimination, Central Park 5 lie, birtherism, calling Mexicans rapists and drug dealers, banning Muslims, pardoning Joe Arpaio, calling neo-Nazis some fine people, supporting Roy Moore, who said the time in history he liked the most was the slave days. And here we are with referring to Haitians or Africans or the place they come from, send them back to those places because they're you-know-what.
Yeah, I mean, this is both the least surprising as well as the most outrageous, maybe, marker in his presidency. I think Donald Trump has become the typhoid Mary of American politics. I mean, he really needs to be isolated from having any kind of comment about politics because he's a danger to the country. He's an insult to the country. He's an embarrassment for the country. And by the way, the damage that he's doing to his own presidency, to his own party, to his own agenda is just as great, which we may say is a terrific relief.
His own party, they're not mutes. Paul Ryan.
Where is Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell.
Exactly.
Come on over, brothers. You're welcome to sit down here every day. Yeah. They're some of the most senior leaders in this country. They can speak for themselves. Lindsey Graham was in the room. Radio silent.
Yeah. I mean, look, about these guys, you have to say, you sleep with dogs, you wake up with fleas, to quote Benjamin Franklin. They have richly earned what Trump is giving them in terms of the moral infestation.
But why do you blame Donald Trump for Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan's choices? They were Republicans long before he was. Those are men who speak for themselves.
Well, I mean, they have fully made their bed with this president, and it is morally gutting whatever remains of a sound Republican Party.
Bob Costa, the president talked about a merit-based system, and we know he said he doesn't want people from these countries. But Frank Lutz tweeted out today, remember, he's a Republican pollster, that 43% of people from African nations have bachelor's degrees or higher, which is more than the overall American population, and twice as many Nigerian Americans have a graduate degree as white Americans. You could go to a hospital in Chicago and there are more Ethiopian doctors than there are in Ethiopia. So besides racist, it's absolutely ill-informed and, dare I say, flat out stupid.
Stephanie, beyond the racial vulgarity at play here with these offensive comments, you're seeing a real political problem for the president. Just days ago, he was talking about maybe signing an immigration deal, whatever came to his desk on the Oval Office. Now, because of these comments, Democrats on Capitol Hill tell me this morning they feel they have leverage in the negotiations on all of the issues you mentioned, that their base now is clamoring for them to get more gains in these discussions. And you see the White House really against the wall right now, trying to deal with the big public and political blowback against those remarks.
Against the wall, and there'll be no one to build it if the president doesn't let immigrants in this country, because labor and labor markets are what help our economy thrive. Brendan Greeley, to you, you've actually been doing a lot of work on trade. Steel, for example. Does the president have an understanding of our position of power or lack thereof? Because when he talks about our position on the planet, it seems he doesn't actually know any of the facts.
Well, I think that there's a real issue. I think the president is stuck permanently in the 1980s. Don't get me wrong, it was a good decade, but...
Are you talking style-wise?
No, I'm talking about in terms of his assumption of American power. We could negotiate with the Japanese in the 1980s in a different way than we can negotiate with the world now. We had a market that the world was desperate to get into. There are other developed consumer markets in the world. Ours is not as important important as it used to be. So when he holds out the stick instead of the carrot, look, we'll deny you access to our markets, that's not as significant as it used to be, certainly not as significant as it was in the 1980s. When it comes to labor, you know, we're talking about the deep offense of this statement, and I think that everything that Brett said about that is right. But if we look at the underlying policy, what he's essentially saying is we can decide which groups of people contribute and which groups of people do not contribute. And I think particularly there's another issue right now, which is they're considering revoking the legal status of a large group of Salvadorans who are in America. They've been here for 20, sometimes 30 years. You know, and I don't want to take in vain a word that I know Brett takes very seriously. That's an unconservative argument. Right. There is a huge number of Salvadorans in Maryland, where I live. And I personally know Salvadorans who have come here under TPS. They've started businesses. They're paying taxes. I was just talking to a Salvadoran who started a chain of restaurants in Annapolis, Maryland, about economic development for Annapolis. I wanted his help. You know, we have, and so they're deeply enmeshed in society there. Salvadoran kids go to school with my kids. They're Salvadorans on my old man soccer team, right? And I have to tell you, I have never met a Salvadoran who does not work hard. Right. But so we don't know. They didn't come with PhDs. They didn't come because somebody decided they'd be good. They came because they had to, and they have contributed a ton.
How many people watching the show had grandparents or great-grandparents who came to this country with a PhD in their hand?
Exactly.
My grandmother was a seamstress. My great-grandfather was a carpenter. The essence of this country is that people come with nothing but ambition and a willingness to work hard. And Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that.
Midwin, your parents came from Haiti. I had the chance to go to Haiti a few years ago. And the resiliency that people from Haiti have, they don't need President Trump's approval. What they have to go through every day to survive, the natural and political disasters they face, are stunning. Right. How will Haitians take this?
Well, I can tell you that the blowback has been incredibly crazy. You know, I think that most Haitians are not surprised. And yes, you are correct. Both my parents are from Haiti. I am first-generation American. And when my parents came here, they did so, like most immigrants, looking for a better life. And they've done an extraordinary job in raising two daughters who contribute to American society. And I think that's what's being lost here, is this idea that immigrants come to this country and they do not contribute to this country. Let me just give you a little snapshot about what Haiti is. In 1804, Haiti became the first free black republic in the world. Okay? They kicked out the French and decided that they were going to have liberty and they were going to govern themselves. And as a result, they became a beacon for other Latin American countries and the like for liberty and for democracy. And so starting with that and culminating to today, which happens to be the 8th year anniversary of an earthquake that decimated a country, over 300,000 people lost their lives. So this idea that a group of people come from a country that is a shithole, and I'm going to say the word because it is the word that the president of these United States has used, is outrageous, it's degrading. And I will tell you this about Haitian people: you are not going to meet a group of people who are more resilient, who are more educated, who have more dignity, who are more hardworking, who have more respect, and who want to do nothing more than to contribute to this country and to this world. And again, let me also make a point here that Donald Trump makes a point about he doesn't want people coming from certain countries. I would beseech him to go out and read a book, get off the golf course, visit Haiti, visit Africa, and read that book and understand how history works. A lot of people come to this country because their countries have been destabilized by American foreign policy, okay? In 1915, America occupied Haiti. All right? So I think it's incredibly important that the President of the United States understands the history of what it is that he's talking about.
We got to share that. I mean, first of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. Want to talk about a real American and what a real American looks like? It's Midwin Charles. Well, guess who else weighed in? Senator Dick Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois. He's now speaking out about President Trump's comments. Why? Because he was in the room. And let's listen to what he said just moments ago.
His presentation, the president interrupted him several times with questions, and in the course of his comments, said things which were hate-filled, vile, and racist. I use those words advisedly. I understand how powerful they are. But I cannot believe that in the history of the White House, in that Oval Office, any president has ever spoken the words that I personally heard our president speak yesterday. You've seen the comments in the press. I have not read one of them that's inaccurate. To no surprise, the president started tweeting this morning denying that he used those words. It is not true. He said these hate-filled things, and he said them repeatedly. When the question was raised about Haitians, for example, we have a group that have temporary protected status in the United States because they were the victims of crises and disasters and political upheaval. The largest group's El Salvador, the second is Honduran, and the third is Haitian. And when I mentioned that fact to him, he said, Haitians, do we need more Haitians? And then he went on when we started to describe the immigration from Africa that was being protected in this bipartisan measure. That's when he used these vile and vulgar comments, calling the nations they come from shitholes. The exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly. That was the nature of this conversation. When it came to the issue of, quote, chain migration, I said to the president, do you realize how painful that term is to so many people? African Americans believe that they migrated to America in chains. And when you speak about chain migration, it hurts them personally. And he said, oh, that's a good line. And then when I talked to him about the impact this has on family unification in a nation that values families with the flag as the most important symbols of our future, they scoffed at this notion. It was a heartbreaking moment. But I will tell you this, I'm not going to quit. I have a singular mission, and the mission is this: to give these dreamers and as many members of their families as possible a chance to be part of America's future in a legal status. I am convinced that there's a majority in both the House and the Senate of Democrats and Republicans who support that concept. I know there's an overwhelming majority of Americans who support that concept. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to prepare our bipartisan agreement for introduction into the Senate next week. If the Republican leadership has a better alternative, bring it forward. If they don't, for goodness sakes, give us a vote. I'll be on the phone today with my Republican colleagues and my Democratic colleagues, begging them to support this measure. Time is running out. We have to get this done. My thought that we might get a bipartisan agreement approved by the White House died yesterday. We have to do this and show leadership in Congress to solve this important challenge.